Matthew Stanard first caught our attention in this project with his book Unrolling the Congo, a history of European pro-empire propaganda and the making of Belgian imperialism, which is a fascinating history of Belgium's colonial culture and propaganda endeavors. Welcome.
This whole VR exhibit is multidisciplinary. There's people involved from a wide variety of disciplines, history, art, film studies, media studies. My focus here in my talk is going to be more narrow. I'm going to be looking at this from the perspective of a historian. This exhibit is quite advanced technologically speaking. If you've experienced it, you know what I'm talking about. It's quite advanced. My presentation it's going to be archaic in terms of the technology involved, but by contrast. I didn't even use ChatGPT or AI or anything like that to pull this together, so to give you an idea of how archaic this is. There's a lot of things that could be said about the Panorama du Congo and this VR exhibit. I just want to talk through a few things that I think that came to the fore of my mind when I was thinking about this. I really want to zero in on 3 points to think about the panorama, the VR project, and decolonization. So first I want to put the creation of the panorama in 1911 and then its display in 1913, its first display in 1913, in a kind of historical context, and put it into historical perspective. Then I want to consider it as a tool of propaganda in the context of the larger history of colonial propaganda, really specifically in Belgium, but maybe touching on other areas of colonial propaganda as well. And I want to underline how it didn't just transmit knowledge, it became a producer of knowledge, and a producer of knowledge in a particular way, or a particular kind of knowledge. And then I want to, in a third part, consider the current VR exhibit here in the light of the context of changing attitudes today towards historical knowledge and towards sources. And I really want to emphasize the value of the Panorama du Congo itself as a primary source, and I want to emphasize the significance of projects like this one, which unearth the historical primary source, put it on display, brings it to the public, and forces the public to confront the source, and then asks the public to ask questions about the source. And of course, after this, I very much look forward to the debate and back and forth questions and answers, of course. All right, so we need to understand this as a monumental achievement, disseminating information in Europe. Of course, the panorama also was not just a transmitter of knowledge, it also was a tool of colonial propaganda. And it not only transmitted knowledge, it produced knowledge as well. So we need to also understand it as an instrument of propaganda, a tool by which Europeans develop their own power. Again, it was created to be displayed at the 1913 Exposition Universelle in Ghent, Belgium. This was a World's Fair that, like a lot of other World's Fairs, extended from the spring into the late autumn of that year. 1913, it opened up on April 26th, it closed on November 3rd. And the fair that year...
Beautiful poster.
Yeah, it is.
I haven't seen it
remarkable.
Yeah.
The fair that year, here's a map of the different displays and pavilions and so forth. It was really dominated by 3 countries, Belgium, Great Britain, and France. And maybe you can make that out if the image is too fuzzy. It was, coincidentally, just by chance, the last World's Fair to be held before the outbreak of World War I. It was similar, so that makes it a little bit unique. It was similar in many ways with a lot of other World's Fairs. World's Fairs were happening all the time. There were dozens of them in the era leading up to World War I. This was an important World's Fair for the Belgian Ministry of Colonies because it was the first World's Fair that would be organized in Belgium and take place after the turnover of the Congo from Leopold to Belgium. Now technically, there was another World's Fair. The turnover occurred in 1908. That's when Leopold II surrendered the Congo to Belgium. It was in 1908. There was a World's Fair in Brussels in 1910, which also had a Congo exhibit, which was rather muted. It wasn't a big flashy thing. But that 1910 Brussels World's Fair, these things take a long time to plan, and surely it was being planned the year previous. And Leopold II was still alive. He died in December of 1909. So I think it's fair to say that he still loomed pretty large on the scene when that 1910 World's Fair was being planned. The 1913 World's Fair in Ghent was really the first Belgian one, where the Belgians could show off the Congo as their colony. And the Minister of Colonies at the time, the same Jules Henken, talking about before, who commissioned the Panorama, he wanted this fair to feature a large colonial pavilion that would showcase the Congo and that would show Belgians what the Congo was, to popularize the Congo among the Belgian population. And he also wanted to show off Belgium to the world as a real, legitimate imperial power. And this leads to this very distinctive building, probably the most distinctive building on the fairgrounds that year, the one that housed the Belgian Congo exhibits. This is the Palais du Congo Belge. Huge circular building, it's more than 50 feet tall. One contemporary said of it that it had the look of an oriental minaret, has this sort of a certain look to it, an exotic look at the time. The building was designed by a Belgian architect who I don't believe went to the Congo, I'm not sure, but a Belgian architect by the name of Joseph Colonial. He designed the building. It covered almost 10,000 square meters. It was huge, and as you can see, it dominated one end of the Avenue des Nations, which is one of the main thoroughfares of the fairgrounds. Here's another map of the fairgrounds that year, and there you see the Avenue des Nations, and there's the Palais Colonial, the Palais du Congo Belge. And this is just kind of for fun. I did this just for fun almost. Although, I don't know, maybe you guys have been to Ghent before and visited it. Here's a modern day map of Ghent with all labels and such stripped away. So this is a present day map of Ghent. If you know the Gravenstein, it's a landmark there. So this is more or less the city center. If you take the map of the World's Fair, you can actually take this and put it onto this map like that. So this is not a north to south depiction, of course, of the fairgrounds. I'm just going to do that a couple of times because it took me so long to figure out how to do this. So you see what I'm saying there. And there you can see where the Palais du Congo Belge was located. One reason that the displays of empire, such as the one in Ghent in 1913, were of major significance in Belgium is because so few Belgians ever went to the Congo, ever traveled at all. In fact, the Belgian population, like the total Belgian population, at any one time throughout the colonial period in the Congo, it never exceeded 90,000 people. So that means that there are more people today living in Funchal, in Madeira, than there were Belgians at any point living in the Congo. And you guys don't look particularly impressed by this. The Congo, just to remind you, is absolutely enormous. It's the size of Western Europe, or it's about the size of Greenland. It's one of the largest countries in the world today. I think it's about the 11th largest country in the world today. And at no time did more than 90,000 Belgians reside there. So the vast majority of Belgians, they never traveled to the Congo. That the period during which Belgium hosted Exposition Universelle, the period during which it hosted universal expositions, it maps almost exactly onto the colonial era. So there were other expositions in Belgium, but ones that are qualified as universal expositions. The first one was held in 1885. That was the very year that Leopold II declared the Congo Free State. It was in July of 1885. And the last World's Fair, including right down until today, the last World's Fair that Belgium ever hosted was in 1958. I mean, just on the cusp of Congo's independence. So again, maybe no surprise. These are great opportunities for propaganda, colonial propaganda, and the colonial period maps almost exactly onto this era of World's Fair hosting in Belgium. And if you're wondering, well, did Belgium actually have a colonial display at every single one of these World's Fairs? Well, you can actually map onto this, these World's Fairs, which ones had colonial displays. It's all. Every single one had some kind of colonial display. In fact, in 1958, I hope that this will work. As late as 1958, the Congo section at the 1958 Expo, just outside of Brussels on the Heysel Fairgrounds, it was enormous. There were 4 different sections. The Belgian Congo was one of the World's Fair's 4 sections. Took up an entire section. 7 different pavilions, had a so-called native village there. And again in 1958, this isn't 1858, in 1958, Belgians brought Congolese from the Congo and put them on display in a kind of human zoo.
Matthew, Victor, Anna, who's another curator of the exhibition that I can't see, there, blind by the light. We've had conversations this afternoon, and one of the things we were talking about, Matthew, maybe we could, share this with the audience here, was just the quantity of propaganda that was produced in and around the time frame of the Panorama. So we've found that this amazing artifact, but to discover that it was one of so many more artifacts. Maybe could you flesh that out a little bit? Because, as I say, we've been talking about it this afternoon, but to share it and put context around it for the audience.
Yeah, sure. I hope that I was able to, with my book, Selling the Congo, contribute to our knowledge. Again, produce some knowledge and get people talking about these things and maybe debating these things. Because it really is, it's surprising how much propaganda Belgium produced. When I was writing this dissertation in the book, 20 years ago or so, there had been a fair amount written about British imperialism and propaganda, quite a bit about French propaganda, French expositions like the 1931 exposition in Paris, but almost nothing on Belgium, or just sort of things here and there. And what became clear to me is that there was this whole era of Leopoldian rule in the Congo when these atrocities were occurring. And there were all kinds of attacks on Leopold, attempts to get him to surrender the colony, and this was met with a counter-propaganda campaign. Leopold II, he ran his own propaganda office. Oftentimes he ran it through front organizations. He just made up names of these groups and called them whatever, gave them a name, and then they published something. And he paid journalists. He paid journalists to write books, and paid photographers to take nice photos that promoted his colonialism. He also paid journalists to not write stories, that sort of thing. But a whole slew of propaganda, again, using contrasts and that sort of thing, was produced during the Leopoldian period. And then under Belgian rule, again, it throughout the entire colonial period, it was accompanied, well, you saw the 1958 World's Fair. The entire time it was accompanied by pro-colonial propaganda. Again, trying to assert that Belgium was a legitimate power, and trying to promote the colony among Belgians.
You also mentioned the contribution of the Panorama to produce knowledge. How different would it be if instead of a panorama, a film would have been chosen, or a monument? This specific message was communicated to the Belgian through a panorama. How important was this for the message that was communicated?
You mean the specific form of the panorama? Yeah, I think the power of the panorama, which I maybe didn't really appreciate until today in viewing it, but although I have been to other panoramas, but the power of it, well, I think it's multiple layers or registers. It is very colorful, it's seductive, the artwork is very beautiful, but the fact that it puts you there, it can give actually it's designed to give the visitor the sense that they've actually experienced this thing. And again, the number of Belgians who actually experienced the Congo firsthand, it was tiny. It was just tiny numbers of people from Belgium
So this was like a great opportunity to be there.
To be there, yeah, you could go. That's way to visit. Or you might come away. So this is one of its powers. You could come away and say, yes, I have been there. And of course, then what did you see? You saw something that it wasn't something directly from there. It was a European production with particular goals in mind. But you came away thinking, that is the Congo. Now I know it.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right.
It's like a form of virtual tour.
That's right. That's right.
I was going to ask you, how accurate are the images in Panorama in the original one?
It is, I don't know if this is ironic or not, but it must be some irony that to achieve the goals of this exhibit, you have, through a different medium, but you have to do the same thing, that they were trying to achieve back in 1913. You have to you immerse the visitor into this world. So that's interesting. But of course, the big difference is the explanation that goes along with it here. So you get, the Panorama in 1913. It educated and it entertained. And I think it's fair to say that that's true also of this exhibit, that it is highly entertaining, but it also is seeking to educate. But of course, it's a different kind of knowledge that they're trying to transmit here versus back in 1913.
The painters used over 100 photographs as a reference for the image that they produced, which means that they were somehow worked with accuracy. But at the same time, we have a single vantage point where we see two far away places that could not have been seen from the same vantage point. For example, Matadi and the tropical forest, which is like 300 kilometers away from each other, so there is no single vantage point for both locations. Which means that this is a composition, a montage of different scenes, different parts of Congo, and so it's not accurate in that aspect.
In the overall,
yes.
But in the detail it was.
In the detail it was, and we have come across a few postcards from the time, photographic ones, and we can really check and confirm that, for example, Matadi or the bridge, the train bridge, were just the same. Actually, sometimes it looks like that the photographs were really kind of copied to the painting.